This video is going to discuss the Medicare Therapy Cap and the Medicare Access to Rehabilitation Services Act, which is going to be one of our key issues for the upcoming Hill Day. To start, what is the Medicare Therapy Cap? The Therapy Cap is a hard cap on Medicare Part B Services. This includes outpatient rehabilitation services, such as SNFs, rehab hospitals, and outpatient clinics. Currently, the cap's set for 2017 at $1,980 for OT services and $1,980 for speech and PT combined, which means that regardless of medical necessity, a client could not get services over this level if the hard cap is in place. This policy was part of the Balanced Budget Act of 1997, which means we were looking at 20 years of the therapy cap. The cap has rarely taken effect because Congress has always worked to enact a solution. First, they did this through a moratoria, which means they just paused the law and said that therapy cap law is not going to take effect. Next has been exceptions process, and an exceptions process means that there is a way to get services above the cap. So currently, at the cap level, therapy practitioners have to certify with a KX modifier that the services they're providing are medically necessary. When a client reaches $3,700 in therapy, then that can trigger a manual medical review of the claims. So CMS does a particularly tough scrutiny of claims above $3,700 to make sure that those services are necessary. What's really key is that even though we have these exceptions process in place and the current one runs through the end of this December, if Congress fails to ever act, the cap becomes the law of the land and that hard cap goes back into effect. Our current solution to fight the cap is the Medicare Access to Rehabilitation Services Act, or H.R. 807 or S253. This is a bill that would permanently repeal the cap. It's been introduced in both the House and the Senate, and as you can see, we have a long list of bipartisan co-sponsors. And again, that bill permanently repeals the therapy cap. I want to note that a permanent repeal is probably not going to be just a blanket repeal, one that just repeals the cap without any kind of exceptions process. In the last Congress, we came really close to a permanent repeal. There was an amendment in the Senate that would have repealed and replaced the therapy cap, and it received 58 votes. But that failed in the Senate because for most bills in the Senate, you actually need 60 votes. What happened instead was we got the current two-tiered exceptions process put into place, which again expires December 2017, at the end of that December. So we actually have some momentum. We think that we had 65 votes in the Senate, but for political reasons, some people were asked to change their votes. So a lot of those senators said, okay, but this has become a priority and we need to get this done. So we are currently in a time of momentum from that vote 2 years ago. Something else that's giving us some momentum has to do with the numbers. So concerns about therapy utilization are what brought the cap into place in the first place. And those concerns have been one of the things that has been a barrier to repealing it as well. So AOTA completed an analysis of trends in therapy utilization, comparing 2011, which was before there was any kind of review process in place, to those provided in 2015, which was under this current review process. So what the findings found were that the average per beneficiary spending in 2015 compared to 2011 had decreased by 8%. And this is compared to the overall Medicare spending of an increase of 8%. Similarly, the total spending on outpatient therapy had increased at a slower rate. So it increased by 7%, but Medicare increased by 11%, We're basically seeing that growth in spending as a number of beneficiaries, but not the cost per beneficiary. So these numbers demonstrate that this current review process is doing its job, that it's putting a control on utilization, but it also ensures that beneficiaries have a pathway to receive the care they need. Currently, AOTA is working with coalitions on building consensus legislation or to repeal the cap. Right now, the efforts are bipartisan, meaning both Democrat and Republican, and bicameral, which means the House and the Senate. They all have an interest in a permanent fix. We do work very closely with APTA and ASHA, and we don't put forward any suggestions that all three groups are not on board with. Members of Congress do not want to see any kind of infighting, and we work very, very closely and well with the other two therapy groups to help promote this legislation. We do feel that we have the strongest chance of a permanent repeal in memory, and some of this was at the end of July. There was a hearing on repealing the therapy cap in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, so that was a really strong first step. So moving forward, we need members of Congress to show support for repeal of the therapy cap through co-sponsorship of the Medicare Access to Rehabilitation Services Act. We really need to show the support to make sure that fixing the policy is a priority for 2017. We're well on our way to the end of this year, and there is going to be a lot on the plate at the end of December in addition to the therapy cap. So co-sponsorship of this bill equals a show of support, which we really need. At the time of recording, we had 177 co-sponsors in the House and 28 co-sponsors in the Senate. We will be giving you a final list of co-sponsors the day of, so that you can take a look at the list and make sure that if your members have co-sponsored, that you thank them and you ask them to speak to leadership about their commitment to a permanent fix, that we make sure that this is one of the top priorities of this Congress. If they haven't co-sponsored, then your request is please co-sponsor the bill.